Welcome to Push Go, a podcast presented by Plum, where we highlight the defining moments that impact how we live and work. Today, I'm joined by my friend, Canem Arkan. She's a managing director of Endeavor Heartland. Now, Canem was born in Turkey, was raised in Iraq and New York. She's worked at Citibank, Goldman Sachs, and most recently, she launched Endeavor's Northwest Arkansas chapter here in the Heartland. Today, you're going to hear about how Canem committed to step out of her comfort zone. Living in New York City, working, surrounded by her friends and family, on an amazing career path, and she jumped into something new, nonprofits in Northwest Arkansas. You're going to hear her story and kind of the decision that it took for her, to kind of the gutsy decision to make the move from New York into the Heartland, and also to leave corporate America to jump into the nonprofit world. Can't wait for you to hear her story. Canem, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Hey, I've been looking forward to this for a while, so this is fantastic. So as we've talked before about how you got to where you are today, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
And we don't have to go all the way back to birth, but you have a very unique background in growing up. So tell us a little bit about those early years before you made it to the States for university. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I was born, I like how you asked the question, don't go back to the baby days, but I was born in Turkey. Okay. We lived there for about 3 years, and then my dad's company moved us to Iraq, where we spent about 4 years, and it was during the Iran-Iraq war.
Oh, wow.
So I had no other context, but there would be bombs exploding in nearby towns where you could see. And as a kid, that just seemed normal to me because that's what I grew up with. We lived in these fenced-in towns where all the architects and engineers were helping build irrigation canals to bring water to the small towns we lived near.
Okay.
So it was a really crazy time to be there. Saddam Hussein was in charge. There was no television, or if it was all propaganda. So It was a very crazy amount of time. And I went directly from there to Queens, New York.
So this is age 7? Like
age 7.
You were already in school, first, second grade
school.
type. Okay,
Yep.
So you were in school coming in, and then bam, you hit Queens. So what was that like?
That actually was crazy because I went from being able to roam around a huge, effectively small town made up of these Turkish family friends and coworkers of my parents to never being able to leave a tiny little apartment.
Oh, wow.
So that was, there was a lot of negative effect, a loss of freedom from doing that.
Okay.
And I had no cultural context to what things were and what was happening.
Okay.
I did speak English at the time because we went to an international school in near Baghdad at the time. But so, yeah, that was a big culture shock. And
now this is just you and mom and dad, or did you have siblings? Is this a big family move, aunts and uncles, or is this really just you and your mom and dad?
My mom, my dad, my sister, and I.
Okay. Are you the oldest?
I'm the younger one.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
So older sister's there. Okay.
Older
and how old was she?
there. She's 4 years older than me, and we are incredibly close.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I think going through something like this and really having to make friends every time you move, especially countries and languages, makes you really close. So
okay, so you're in Queens, and this is like feeling like that this is the beginning of hometown.
Yep.
And so kind of a U.S., New York, Queens kid background then? You guys didn't travel anymore? Was that kind of like through your formative years at that time?
Yes, and we moved from Queens to Manhattan about 2 years after that.
Okay.
So I spent 2 years in Queens and then Manhattan, there was a huge culture shock because then I went from living in Turkey and Iraq to an all-girl Catholic school on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
Wow.
So that was a little bit different too. But I think all of that gives you the confidence to say, I can adapt. I can sort of reinvent myself. I can find the things I like and bring them with me, and then sort of drop the things I don't like. And actually, I was going to say, I talked to my sister on my way over here to tell her that I was doing this because I'm still so close to her because of this relationship that we cultivated over those years.
Oh, that's great. My oldest two were expat kids for a while. And even to this day, they can reflect on that adaptability you're talking about because there's no fear. So, I can do that. And people are saying, really? They're like, oh, that's nothing. And it was a very early age for them, really like 6 through 10, but they still draw on that. Oh, that's great. So take us from there. University, you're a Wharton person? Okay.
UPenn, yes.
UPenn, okay.
I studied economics at UPenn, and I have developed a love of traveling because of my parents and because of this journey. So I spent a year or studied abroad in Australia, and we certainly traveled a lot once my parents had their footing and were able to do that. And we moved from Iraq from a little house that, was, I think it was like 600 square feet to eventually having a nice apartment in New York. And so that transition was also really interesting over the course of my parents' career. But I went to UPenn, so I went from New York to Philadelphia, big city sort of school experience. And then I started working in finance. So I worked in Citigroup in their investment banking division for 2 years.
In the city? In Philadelphia or New York?
Back to New York, yeah. Took a job out of graduating from Philly. And then I spent 10 years at Goldman Sachs in their structured credit division. So if you know the financial markets and the financial crisis that happened in 2007, then you know.
You were living that.
I was living that, yeah.
Wow, so you're in that Big Short world. The movie portrayed some things.
I didn't watch the movie,
no
honestly.
Way, you didn't?
I didn't because I knew that it was going to have inaccuracies and it was going to drive me nuts to know that it's hard to make a movie like that that's very accurate. Yeah. And I worked with some incredible people, and there were people who cared about, the finance and their company and the world. And so I think the movies like that always like to dramatize those things. But
totally get it.
Yeah. But I lived through the financial crisis, and we would, we watched the stocks tick down, and then we watched them tick back up. And it was a very interesting time to be aware of how easy it is to lose your livelihood, right? And I was very lucky that I managed to keep my position, but a lot of people in finance didn't.
Yeah. Now, at this time, you are leaning forward in the financial world. Have you, at this time, still single? Have you started a family yet? Because you're getting close to family, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So at this time, your financial crisis is hitting your 2009, 10.
Yep.
Still in Manhattan, still in the city, still driving. And did you transition from Goldman at that time?
So I got engaged to a person I met at Goldman.
Of course you did.
Of course I did.
My wife and I are dual proctor people. So you're dual Goldman, all the acronyms. You totally understood each other, right? You could talk and speak. Yeah.
And you spend so much time at work in those years that where else are you going to meet anybody?
Right.
And he's an Arkansan. So that's the beginning of that next chapter. We got married, we got engaged in 2008 while the world was crumbling around us. And we got married in 2010. It's good I remember that.
Yeah, close one.
But, he sort of saw the writing on the wall about what was happening and wanted to go be entrepreneurial and start his own industry. And I loved my job and was very thankful for the people at Goldman who had the wherewithal to keep the firm intact at that time. And we wanted to get married and have kids. So that was happening. And New York is a really interesting place to do that, right? Okay. Especially with two working parents, especially with the fact that, if you want to live outside the city or in suburbia, you're at least an hour away. So that is a really interesting
crazy
dynamic.
Commute, yeah.
So we ended up getting married, having a kid. So I was working at Goldman. I had a 1-year-old, Levi, who is now 10, which is crazy. And my husband said, let's move to Arkansas.
Just like that. Hey, let's move.
Let's move. We'd been and visited his family, and he's a teacher at the University of Arkansas, and so he had been doing 12 to 14-week courses over the summer.
Like some adjunct kind of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And I said, you are crazy. I would never move to Arkansas. Truly never move to Arkansas. And then he kept planting the seed in there. Oh my goodness.
So let's poke on that, because we talked about these defining moments. So it's one thing to say, there's Goldman Sachs and there's the work, and can I work remote? But New York's pretty much, it's kind of who you are. But your sister, is she still there?
She's still there.
Sister's there, mom and dad, all of these, let's say, business or, peers and friends of yours. And I would have to think you have a great kind of group of mentors and people that pour into you and you're pouring into them. I mean, this is your circle. So you're not just changing job. You would be leaving kind of what you've known.
And really people I admire and people I've cultivated, we mentioned Philadelphia, but it was a big feeder community to New York. So you graduate from Penn, which has Wharton, and it's a huge finance community. So I transferred back to New York with not just a built-in work network, but some of my best friends and my sister and my parents and my mentors in my firm. So I'd been at Goldman for 10 years, which is a long time to be at the same firm in finance, at least. It was an unthinkable change. I truly never thought he'd really pick the day and that it would actually happen.
So you guys are processing this behind closed doors, engaging. Obviously, your family's kind of there. What are your friends saying? The friend that's on this shoulder and this shoulder, you've got two different friends, right?
Both friends are on this shoulder.
And are they saying, are you crazy? Or are they talking you out of it? Like help me think, kind of how that's playing out.
I mean, Rick, you know this. You have traveled the world. So you know that it is hard for people to understand what exists outside. And especially in this day and age of information transfer, there are certain views, fair or unfair, about Arkansas. Certainly nobody had, that I, basically grown up with in New York, had ever heard of, Springdale, Arkansas. I mean, they've probably heard of Tyson.
Or to find on the map.
Yes. No, there's no way. There's no way. And I like to joke that my older son was born on the Upper East Side, and my younger son was born in Johnson, Arkansas.
Nice.
And I think the hospital had as many people in it as the town of Johnson. So that was a big change. But they thought I was crazy. They thought there was no work opportunity. They thought you're going to be miserable. It's going to end your marriage. And I'm being really honest here because it was a lot of things that I was processing at the time. My parents and I are very close, as with my sister. And so moving away from them after this journey of travel that we'd had was very, very hard. It still is. And they're coming next month.
Oh, that's so good.
So I'm very excited. And so knowing that I was leaving not just those people behind, but my potential future earning potential and career was really, really hard. And it sounds easy. You're like, oh, pick up and move. But, moving from New York City to Fayetteville, Arkansas is a big cultural transition too.
Yeah. So as you're processing through that, what was that tipping point? We talked about push and go. What was that deciding factor? Did you say, give up, I'm just going to go? Did you have a friend or mentor? Or was it really just you as a couple? Like, what was that moment that you was like, not only am I going to go, I'm going to lean in, we're going to make this thing happen? Were there a group of people? Because there is a point that you're like, I give up, or yes, I'm going to lean in. So walk us through that.
For me, it was preparation. So I found a job that I could work with in finance remotely. And it was with a group of ex-Goldman people who run a fantastic hedge fund. And I said, I would work for you remotely I would work for you if you would let me work remotely. And so I lined that up. And then I said, okay, but we need to make sure we have an apartment here so that if we ever need to come back, we can do that.
So you kept a tether. So you didn't quite completely break. You had a work connection. You had an apartment connection. Okay, I see how this is working out. And you've got safety nets.
Safety nets. That's
and it's
exactly
okay,
right.
but still, there's safety nets. All right.
And that was more for me and the way I process things and the way I was able to say, okay, I'm going to commit fully to this with an escape hatch.
Okay. No.
So, and I will give credit to my husband, who's a finance person. So he said, I'll give you a 3-year contract.
He
said,
good.
If at the end of 3 years in Fayetteville, Arkansas, you hate it, we will pick up and move on that day to wherever you want to go. Back to New York, Europe, anywhere. And I said, okay, deal.
That's a good deal, because I've heard this analogy once before of entrepreneurs that start. And we're going to talk about entrepreneurship a little bit later, but the entrepreneur going to the spouse or their partner and saying, would you just hold this heavy rock for a year? Or would you just hold this thing for 18 months? And I commit to you at this point, we'll reevaluate. And there's something freeing and reassuring. Is like, I can do that. I can work 3 years. I can take that time. So was that the tipping point? Was that what you needed, that you can go back?
Yeah, it felt like I can give it my all. I can have the best attitude and try my hardest for 3 years. Okay. And if that doesn't work, then I know I didn't let him down or let this lifestyle down.
Yeah, because it's important to be all in, and 3 months isn't long enough. A year's what? 3 years is fair, because you really do have a chance. You've got seasons. You can work through things. So that's great. So you're coming, you've made the decision, parents are crying, sister's not really sure, your friends are like, I give it a month, right? Or give it a week. So did they have like the pool where they're all betting to see how long that Canem's gonna last?
They definitely didn't think the full 3 years. But I think I've surprised myself. We are now going on almost 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think I've embraced this community in a way that my husband even hasn't had the chance to, because I really fell in love with the spirit of entrepreneurship here. Okay. And have since found a way to, I was able to leave my old position so I wasn't having to go back to New York back and forth so much, but really do something here, supporting the local community here. And I do think that, you know this because you have a wonderful family here, but raising a family here is truly wonderful. And that has to be the calculus for any entrepreneur and anybody starting a business, because you're not doing it alone. Your family has to support you. Tomorrow I have a full day of meetings. My husband has to pick up the kids, drop them off, get their lunch ready, tuck them in, and I won't be there for any of that. And I can't do that without him. So, and I would be remiss to say without my mother-in-law, who is the best mother-in-law a person can have. So
grandmas are great.
Grandmas are
fantastic.
The best. Yeah.
So you're coming here and everything was perfect. I'm just joking. Okay. Because let's talk through that week 1, month 1. I mean, were you at a point where you had buyer's remorse? Was it a fairly easy transition? Because you've lined up, I've got my job, the family's here, mother-in-law, I mean, everything's coming in. What was it like the first couple of weeks here for Canem, the person? Forget about Canem, the mom and the wife, but just the person. Are you thinking remorse or, wow, I can make a go of this?
Oh, it was a lot of remorse that first week.
Okay.
I cried a lot, and I'm not a real crier, but my mother-in-law sweetly gave me a gift certificate for a massage, so I was getting that and just sobbing on this table. This poor masseuse was probably like, what's happening? I cried a lot. I kept asking myself, what am I doing here? I've built a career for myself and a a path of success in New York. And so what am I doing here? Have I given all that up? And, you know, a lot of remorse, a lot of regret. And I did that. And then I said, okay, no more. So at the end of that first week, I said, no more crying. We're going to move forward.
So you committed to yourself, I'm done with this. This is not how Canem would handle business and other things.
Right.
You gave yourself a good pity party, which was, I've been there before. I've had a couple of those in my life. But I love where you much like the 3-year conversation, you say, give yourself a week. I mean, you can't not, you have to process things. But I love the fact you kind of drew a line and say, okay, I'm going to move forward. So now you're moving forward. At what point did you say, wow, this is good? I mean, this is okay. This is going to work out. Did it take a year? Was it a few months? When did it kind of really come to you that I can work remote with an amazing, you know, hedge fund, and I can have a family here, and I can still fly and see my friends, and I can still go to a Broadway show? I mean, when did it hit?
There were a couple of key moments, and I think one was when I was pregnant with my second son. I realized, wow, this place is affording me a level of flexibility that I wouldn't have in New York. So I was able to do all the things that a new mom does, all the caretaking, nursing, all that stuff, and still get my job done because I had the flexibility to work remotely, which the whole world realized how important that was a few years later.
So you were working remote before it was cool.
Before it was cool.
Yeah.
But we didn't even Zoom then. You just called somebody on a regular phone call.
Zoom what? No.
So that moment of having that flexibility in my job and loving what I do, but still being able to, you know, make accommodations for my family, that was super important. And I'm actually going to say this. I don't know if you know this, Rick, but one of the earliest times that, you know, this was actually 6 years later when I transitioned over to Endeavor, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But actually a conversation with Henry on your team was so pivotal for that, because I had been thinking about how this nonprofit that I work for and run locally called Endeavor, if we could actually help companies. And Henry was the first person to give us a chance, truly. And I had doubted every decision up until that, switching from hedge funds and
that's
finance.
Encouraging. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know, my transition to hedge funds, even remotely, still gave me an open door to stay in finance. And I think once I switched to Endeavor, Henry and his willingness to listen and his thoughtfulness around what was possible, I mean, that was just so huge. Yeah,
I'll let him know that. That's really encouraging to us to know that was one of those moments.
I was a field agent and slash Plum support network. Okay. So I'm really thankful for all of you for that.
Okay. So now we're feeling pretty good. We're a year or two in. So was it 6 full years here for the hedge fund?
Yep.
So it really was 13 through 19. Is
That's
that right?
right.
So
That's
13
perfect.
through 19 was the hedge fund. And so were you being recruited? I mean, or did you always have a contact and relationship with Endeavor? How'd you make the transition? I mean, even a nonprofit, you've got to have your friends saying, what? I mean, forget about Endeavor's amazing. And even though you've got hedge fund people that love Endeavor, your friends have to say, really? A nonprofit? So how did that come about? How were you recruited in?
It was a little bit of a love story, if you will.
Okay.
The hedge fund I work for was in the same industry as Goldman. I was working in structured credit, this time sort of selling and promoting our hedge fund, which invested in the assets that I was most familiar with. But in the back of my head, I had, or at least 10 years in 2010, I had spent some time while I was still in New York with Endeavor, which is an organization that supports high growth, high impact entrepreneurs like you guys. And I thought, I love this model of promoting job growth and wage growth and entrepreneurship through a nonprofit. Like this structure is so unique and interesting, and you get to meet the smartest people in the world who want to change the way things are done. So I always thought like, oh man, I would love to do more with Endeavor, but at the time they were only doing emerging markets offices. They were only doing emerging market support systems.
Okay. Now you knew of, or did you have a relationship with person A at that time?
I had a relationship with Linda Rotenberg, who who's the founder.
Okay, that's a great relationship. Yeah. If you had one,
straight to the top.
Canem, that's a great relationship. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yes.
So great relationship.
And then the president at the time, a gentleman named Fernando Fabre, And I called Fernando and I said, hey, I just realized you're opening up U.S. offices supporting underserved economies in the U.S. Have you ever thought about Arkansas? And he was like, nope, never thought.
Easy
Where
now.
is it?
Yeah.
And they actually came and did a couple of trips to see what was happening here.
And you hosted them here?
I hosted them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So you were really on the early, I guess, the brainchild of saying this is the right market.
Yeah, I called them to come in. And at the time, I didn't necessarily have a vision of being the person to run the office here. I was more, a facilitator to say Endeavor should exist in this market, whether or not I'm involved with it. But I think for the story of transitions, believing in something and working for it, even if it's not going to affect you personally, is a really great way to actually do those transitions.
Yeah.
So they came, they saw, they were still a little worried, how the density alone is very different. So there's an Endeavor Brazil, and how do you think about that in relation to an Endeavor Northwest Arkansas or Tulsa? But they saw what I saw, which was that we're home to some very large companies, and the entrepreneurship and innovation that has to support those companies has to be amazing, right?
Yeah.
And so they sort of agreed to open up an office here and then asked me to join them there. And that was a really big step, because now I was losing one of my tethers.
Right. And now talk about, you've got friends on the shoulder saying, but I thought this was the path to get you back.
Right.
So
certainly my sister and parents, very disappointed in that. I think that everyone realized at this point that, in 2019, the world still seemed very normal.
Right.
But actually very quickly, my decision to do that became very clear in 2020 when we were dealing with the pandemic.
Right.
People realize the flexibility, the need for entrepreneurship, how quickly companies can change when resources are taken away or there's a big exogenous shock to our system. And so all of that, I think I was lucky to stumble into, but also believed in all that before it became so apparent. And so, funnily enough, I had many friends, New York friends, who took months out of their lives and worked remotely in smaller, more rural areas, just like I'd been doing. And they said, oh, now I see.
Now I understand, why you made this call. Wow. Yeah. So at that time, again, starting Endeavor here, so it wasn't just an easy layup. I mean, it's hard work to start an office anywhere. It's also hard work to kind of create this environment of telling people who you are, because Endeavor wasn't a household name here, or really even in the U.S. It really was an international piece that the right influential people understood, but the everyday entrepreneur would say, I'm in the U.S., I don't even understand what Endeavor is. So how did that, was that a tough challenge? Was that the primary hurdle you had to kind of overcome?
It's still a hurdle, right?
Okay,
I think
awareness is still
a hurdle. And I mean, again, I think I should ask you this question, because I think so many of the challenges we take on, they take longer than we think.
Yes.
And the challenges we think you're going to have to take path X, and it's really Y that's going to get you where you're going. So I'm still struggling with that. I have an incredible group of board members who support what we do. Who are incredible local leaders in many of the things happening in Northwest Arkansas. And we have a really great support system in Tulsa with some of our foundation work there and ecosystem builders there. So it's still, I'm going to use the word, it's still an uphill battle.
Okay.
But it's not, it's not one that isn't rewarding. And I would love to come on your podcast in about 3 years and talk about this next transition, because I think life is full of these little S curves, and sometimes you're really up and then you plateau and you have to figure out, how do I advance my career and my knowledge to the next level? But also, how do I, help the people I want to be helping, and how do I support the ecosystem I want to be supporting in a more effective and efficient and meaningful way? So Endeavor is a very unique, network, essentially, because we operate independently across 41 offices. So you have this tool you can tap, but you have to make sure you're being really thoughtful about it, because otherwise you don't want to waste anybody's time. You want to make sure that it's a resource that's helpful. And so switching from a very Goldman works this way or finance works this way, there's A, B, C, and D, and you get promoted to this, and then you make this happen. Switching that mindset to being very nebulous about how things grow was maybe one of the most challenging transitions for me.
Well, let's talk about Canem transitioning here, because I came from the Proctor world, and I had a network. It was a very specific network around the globe. I could call on people, I had mentors, and we're going down this path, and I start this entrepreneurial thing, and I kind of start all over again. So let's speak to that. You've got Goldman, you've got the hedge fund, you've got all these connections. Well, you've been here long enough now. Speak to kind of starting over, so to speak, in the mentoring network. And have you started to release some of those connections in the finance world and you've started new? Speak to that a little bit.
Yes, and that's very hard. I am an extrovert, and so I love listening to and hearing and learning from the stories of people who have been there and done that. And so building a community actually wasn't that hard for me. It's something I really enjoy, and I love being part of this community, because really the way people approach newcomers and outsiders here is so positive. I can't highlight that enough. If you haven't found your home in this country, come to Northwest Arkansas.
I love that. Yes.
Because you will find your home here. And yes, there's not enough time in the day to keep up with all the networks. So that transition, knowing that I don't keep in touch with my old mentors and the people that whose advice I valued so much, and people whose careers I wanted to emulate, that has been really hard. So I don't know. I mean, how did you do that? It's been a very hard transition for me, and I'm not sure I've worked it out all the way yet. But
it's not you're not supposed to ask me questions. I'm supposed to ask you. But here's my encouragement to you. When I came here at 38, so at this time in my career, it was also a pivotal time because I was becoming more of the mentor, even though it was new. And so my encouragement to you, without answering the question, is that you do reach a point in time where you're like, yeah, I still need mentors. And I do. I've got a few that I've hung on to over the years. But you start to realize it's time for me to be that person. And I've seen people in your life and people around here that's like, oh, I talked to Canem about this, and with Canem, and even the young entrepreneurs, or even the people that are with your husband's class are coming through. So what was it like working for a hedge fund? What was it like in the city? And help me think through. You're in an amazing position to mentor others. And so my encouragement to you would be, you need the mentorship, but you really are in the sweet spot in your life where you can really start to pour into folks. And I started spending more time doing that than worried about my own mentorship, because mentorship was really important in the corporate world. And mentorship is completely different in the entrepreneurial world. It's more of networking mentorship than helping me move along. So speak a little bit to that. So people are always needing 5 minutes of Janen's time, right? Come in. Have you found that as an opportunity for you to mentor and give back? Or are you still working through that? Because as the managing director here, that's a big role. And when you think of Endeavor, you think of Canem. I mean, the name is kind of synonymous with, no, it is in this area. So how's that worked out?
I think that it is it's a hard process to let go of. You're so right. And I grew up with a corporate structure, and these are the people you talk to if you want to get your career advanced. These are the people you talk to when you thought about switching, and here are the senior level people you aspire to talk to.
Right.
And it is very different in the entrepreneurship world. I mean, so much of it is so much more symbiotic, right? Like, as an entrepreneur, you want to help somebody, and you know that they will help you eventually. And it comes from a place of wanting everybody to succeed, the sort of rising tide. And so it's
different.
It's very different.
So different.
It's very different. Whereas I would reach out to the, managing director ahead of me when I was a VP and say, help me think about the next stage of my career. And it was very much one-sided in that. And I'm thankful for all those people. So I like to think that I have opportunities in venues to give back. The university is an amazing place to do that. And those are really like graduate students and undergrads who are thinking about starting their own business. I volunteer at the office hours that happen at the university every Friday. So there are places like that, but I still think I'm in that transition mode. And I will maybe look to you over the next couple of years to see how that works.
Yeah. And I find it was pretty cool. And we'll see how this plays out in your life over the next few years, now that Northwest Arkansas is home.
It's home.
In the corporate world, it was difficult to engage peers because they were your competition. As much as you thought they were your friends, everyone is your competition. Well, in the entrepreneurial world, that's not, other CEOs that I engage with, we're not competing against, maybe for recruiting a developer or something. But,
right, talent.
But for the most part, you're really trying to help your peers, and it's not as much up and below as I thought it would be. Because at first when I came in, I was like, can I really be open and kind of talk about my woes? You realize, I have to, because it's a really small ecosystem that you have, and you have to be able to pin like that. So it's going to be interesting to see as that moves along. So let's transition into the what's next for Endeavor and Canem. I just joked about this is home. So this is home. The tethers are starting to go away. Mom and dad know how to get here. They can make it. Your sister knows how to make it here. What do you see that's next for Endeavor, and even kind of the ecosystem we're in today? Not really projections, but what's really in front of you?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I mean, it's my job, but also because I sort of love the ability for this place to be a center for change for the whole country. Okay. So, we're very divided politically as a country. We're very divided economically as a country. There's so many things that Arkansas and our surrounding areas are the epicenter of, where if we can create change here, if we can show the country how we can work through the issues we have of, the 21st century, or the 22nd century, we can get stuff done in this country. So I think Arkansas is the epicenter of that. We have amazing corporations. We have amazing foundations. We have beautiful landscapes. We have fresh air, clean water, things that are surprisingly not available in all areas of the country right now. And we have entrepreneurship. So we have companies like Field Agent, what you're doing with Plum, and I can name 100 more around the area. So in my mind, we have to continue to push and highlight those things so people want to start their companies here, and people who start companies here want to stay here. So that's our mission anyway. Right. But I think one way we can do that, one way I think about doing that is we can't do it alone. So we need to rely on places like Tulsa and Kansas City, and we need to say, hey, you have an expertise in healthcare, data tech in Cerner in Kansas City, or the oil and gas industry is going to be the next energy industry of our sector because they're continuing to invest in clean energy and clean tech and, greenifying their existing infrastructure because they have to. So how do we think about those resources and how they affect the economies of our companies here? So I think about that a lot. And I also think that, like you said, it's probably lonely and it's a small community here, but how do we connect you to like-minded CEOs, not just in Arkansas or Oklahoma, but around the US and the world? So that's another one of our missions. How do we get you feedback from people who aren't in your ecosystem, aren't necessarily, going to be swayed by the same influences that you're swayed by. To expand your horizon.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm focused on right now. And seeing those big changes for my founders that I work with, like that's really empowering, right? To know that we have either helped or we're encouraging with or supporting or pushing up or, quite frankly, just echoing the things that they are doing, the big transitions that they're making, that sort of is incredibly powerful.
Wow. First of all, that's really encouraging. So it's encouraging to me, being in this ecosystem. One last thought about the term heartland. Is that a term you're beginning to use? Because you mentioned Tulsa, Kansas City versus Northwest Arkansas. As you broaden your circle, where do you see in the next 3 to 5 years, how broad is your circle? Because you have an Endeavor office in Louisville, and so you don't want to get too far north. Okay, but as you look at that, where do you think that circle is going to kind of expand to? And I use the term heartland. Is that a term you would use?
We do. We actually, we think of it as the heartland because entrepreneurship doesn't have borders, right? I mean,
say that again. Yeah,
entrepreneurship does not have borders.
That's really good.
Yeah, and Field Agent knows this because you have agents all over the country, really all over the world, and so. We want to focus on sort of our 4 states of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, and Missouri, but ultimately, entrepreneurship exists in Texas and it's not well supported, or Louisiana. So we're going to be a little bit organic about that expansion, but I want to support entrepreneurs who want to have an impact on this heartland region, whether it's through mentorship or capital or, just serving as an inspiration. So as much as our resources can carry us, right now we're focused on Oklahoma and Arkansas, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, listen, Canem, you've been an amazing advocate and evangelist for the area, so thank you for that. I will have you back in 3 years. In 3 years, we will have this conversation and we'll figure out where this thing goes. So thank you so much for being on our show today.
Rick, thank you so much for having me. I'm such a fan of what you all are doing, all the give back you and your leadership team at Field Agent have for the community, give to the community. And so thank you for all that.
Appreciate that. So if someone wanted to track you down,
yes,
what's the best way to get that cup of coffee with Canem, the new mentor of the area? Or just to learn more about Endeavor, what's the easiest way to do that?
We're on endeavornwa.org is our website. We're on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. But I'm at canem.arkan@endeavor.org. And if you can spell Canem correctly, then we're all set.
That's a bonus. Yeah. That is a bonus. When you go to the show notes, we'll figure that out. It is one of the more unique names. And I know as a kid you had to have been like, no, it's Canem. It's not.
No, as a kid, like yesterday.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
So it's a Turkish name, and it has brought me both great joy and a lot of anguish over the years. And I'm thankful for my parents for giving me an opportunity to talk to people about it. So
that's great. Well, we're going to make people research that and go search for that in the show notes to figure that one out.
Yes.
Canem, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for listening to Push Go, a podcast highlighting the defining moments that impact how we live and work. It was great to have Canem on the show today. If you like what you heard, you can find more stories just like this on listen.plumshop.com. But hey, we wouldn't be mad if you left us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And we also have new episodes every Wednesday. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. Now, as a PS, kind of like one last thing in our Plum Spotlight, the old PS thing here. This is a weekly segment where I give you a brief update on something happening at Plum. Could be an inside look at what's coming, exciting team and culture news, updates, or industry news. And this week, I want to call out our product launch ebook. It's filled with tips and tricks to kind of set you up for success at every stage of a new product launch. Think of it going from pre-launch product development to launch day itself, even for some post-launch strategies. Think of it as your guidebook, and it's free. Check it out on our blog, the Plum blog, and where you can shop. Now, the Plum Retail Solutions is set up to make sure that your product launch goes off without a hitch, and I want to give you something today. You can use the code PUSHGO, PUSHGO, and check out with any one of our products for $100 off of any project that's in front of you. So make sure you go to plumshop.com to shop and use the code PUSHGO.